seconded by Councillor Cashmore.
It's already done.
Cooper, sorry. Right. So,
He
no
did
other speakers?
LA.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. So now we move to item 12, the district licensing review. Oh, no, sorry, community facilities plan. Sorry, jumped there tonight. And the documents are all in the. Well, you've obviously read them in the attachment paper. Liz,
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, councillors. Just before I start, I'd just like to introduce my colleagues. So my GM, Katarina Maki, and David Shami, who's been one of the key officers who's been leading this plan, and also Anita Koimakin, who's behind me, and available to answer questions as well. So this is a milestone moment for us councillors as we're here to seek your approval for the Community Facilities Network Plan. As you know, Council has a network of over 350 community facilities across the region, which represents a really significant investment by our ratepayers. And we know how important community facilities are to local communities and that they deliver significant benefits that align with our Auckland Plan outcomes, particularly around creating opportunities for communities to come together and participate in a wide range of activities. But going forward, Council does need to take a strategic approach to how we provide and invest in community facilities, particularly in an increasingly tight fiscal environment. The need to control costs, maximise value for money and balance the demands of growth are all things we need to consider carefully. So the Network Plan is a long-term aspirational plan to guide Council's investment in the provision of facilities over the next 20 years. It seeks to address gaps in our current provision and to balance and look at and respond to the needs of growth and maximise our existing facilities so that we actually develop a fit-for-purpose network across the region. It provides direction for the development of new facilities, major upgrades of existing facilities, optimisation, and also around potential divestment where facilities are no longer meeting community needs. It's been informed by comprehensive engagement with our local boards, with key stakeholders, and through research and analysis. And we're pleased to report that the plan has support of local boards. 18 out of 20 have formally supported the plan, so we're really pleased about that. The Network Plan has an associated action plan with a whole series of actions that we've prioritised because we really want to focus on where we need to act most quickly and most urgently. So the short-term focus is on actions with funding in the first 5 years of the long-term plan, on the network priority actions, particularly in spatial priority areas, and where there are opportunities for optimisation. So just to sum up, the overall intent and goal of this plan is to deliver more strategically placed and integrated community facilities in the most strategic and cost-effective way. We want to deliver the right facility in the right place at the right time. So that's enough for me, and very happy to answer any questions.
are there any questions for the presenters? Councillor Cashmore, Councillor Casey, Councillor. Councillor Cashmore. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, hi, and thanks, team. Comprehensive piece of work. Looking ahead, when the word gap here is mentioned a lot, and growth, how is we going to measure up our DC contributions around the growth and the desire for communities for some very expensive kit and for facilities, and rightly so. So what is the gap between the two, or are we about par?
Look, that is a challenging question because recently with the change in the DC policy, that means that some aspect of community facility provision will no longer be covered by DCs. Primarily, DCs are now around directly relating the benefits of that growth, who's going to benefit from that growth, and that money gets targeted to the very localised facilities. So it will support in some community centre provision, but things like libraries and recreation centres and aquatic facilities that have a much broader catchment may no longer qualify for DC. So it is a challenge. We are certainly conscious in terms of gaps. What we're looking at, we have provision frameworks within the plan that identify the kind of provision we need to provide to cater for population growth and therefore where, given the population growth that we're facing, where those might be. And I guess that's the challenge we'll have in terms of balancing the ratepayer investment with what we can get through DCs. But it is a challenge, I have to say.
Supplementary, Mr. Chair, if I may. So on a basic cash flow issue year by year, have the holes been identified roughly?
The
or
plan
accurately?
broadly identifies the provision gaps, but what we need to do, and this is what the action plan identifies, is we need to investigate those further, because sometimes the response may not need to be a facility, because although council may not have a facility, there are churches and marae and other providers of community facilities that we may well be able to support or tap into. So a gap that we've identified doesn't necessarily mean a facility solution, but we need to do that further, more detailed analysis to understand what the right response might be.
I look forward to that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Councillor Casey?
Oh, hi Liz, I've got two questions, one on the plan and one on the action plan. The question on the plan was just really relating to Waiheke. You know, can you talk us through that? Because I always think there's a case to be made for them being a special case.
And our provision frameworks do acknowledge that rural communities and island communities, we do need to look slightly differently at them. We can't apply urban standards or frameworks to those in the same way. And what we have identified on Waiheke, we understand their desire for a pool, and we have identified that as a gap. Unfortunately, when we look across the region in terms of where priorities are, there are some much higher priorities. But what's happening with Waiheke is that staff are working with them to see if there's an option or an ability to have a partnership or another way of delivering the outcome that they want for a pool. So unfortunately, from a network point of view, it's not a priority, but it has been identified still as a gap and an action in the future. It's just around, you know, the relative priority of that against other things.
And do you measure that priority with regard to their influx of visitors?
Network
part of the
priorities
year?
are based on a number of factors, so there's criteria in the plan around that. I think it's section, David, 5.2. But it looks into things like what is the level of growth that's happening, what is that level of unmet demand, so partly that is population and the numbers that are required. It's also around the size of the catchment, how far people have to travel. There's other factors like what the local community actually want, and so there's a whole range of criteria that we look at to determine a network priority.
Is visitors one of those?
Yes, absolutely. So the level of demand that a facility might attract, yes.
My second question's a more difficult one. It's in the action plan. It's with regard to solving the issue of the future of the Mount Albert pool and filling the gap that you've now identified for the western corridor. Last night, the Albert Eden board made a decision about Chamberlain Park, and the word aquatic centre kept coming up. Is there an opportunity to look at other sites?
Absolutely.
Apart from Chamberlain Park?
Absolutely.
Golf course.
There is, the plan identifies as a priority action looking at that inner west corridor in terms of aquatic provision. We know that Mount Albert Pool has issues. We know we need to look at what the appropriate response is. And that really, that inner west corridor runs from Mount Albert right through to Glen Eden, is it?
Oh, no,
Anita?
wait, no, you're not understanding my question. I'm talking about Mount Albert sites for the Mount Albert pool.
Absolutely, there are other Mount Albert sites that we would look at. So in looking at that whole corridor, we would look at a range of, you know, what is the best solution for that whole catchment area, including what are the sites within Mount Albert that would be possible.
That would be sites we don't at present own but could own, is that what you mean?
Look, I don't want to preempt that analysis and that review, so we would need to do that work. Are there sites that we own that we could use, including Chamberlain Park? So that's absolutely a site that we would be looking at, as well as sites like the Mount Albert Rocket Park and potentially other sites. So, you know, Unitech has been raised in the past as well, so there might be a range of sites that we would want to look at and say, what's the best opportunity? Looking at all the sort of technical requirements of pools, including, you know, what's the geotech concerns and with various sites. So there's a whole lot of factors that we need to take into account, and that's what a detailed analysis would do.
Just to flag the concern of the two Albert Eden Roscoe ward councils,
We're aware
that the
of.
Mount Albert pool stays in the Mount Albert area.
Absolutely, and we're aware of that. And any piece of work would absolutely, we would work closely with the the Albert Eden local board on it. So we would take into account their views and concerns.
You, Councillor Cooper?
I think I've answered my own question. I just can't find some stuff on the map. But I just in terms of, for example, the leisure centres with swimming pools, what have we noticed around the uses with the under 16 free swimming pool thing? Is it actually encouraging people? Is it discouraging other groups?
Okay, thank you for your question. I might defer to Anita on this. She's our resident swimming pool expert. So Anita, if I can ask you to come to the table.
Thank you.
We are doing, or almost completed, a piece of work on the impact of the swimming pool pricing policy on our swimming pools. So we've looked at the impact on usage and the impact on catchments and user profiles and all of those sorts of things. I wouldn't like to sort of completely preempt the presentation of that report, but fair to say that children under the age of 16 were already very high users of swimming pools, and they had continued to be so.
It hasn't made a massive increase.
Yeah, so we have had some isolated areas where there has been some significant impact, but overall they were already, I mean, they make up 56% of the user profile in terms of the swimming pool users, and they continue to be up in that sort of that area.
And is there, sorry, Mr Chairman, so has there been some work done in that study about how it's affected people who, like, I've had to get a lot of complaints from people that pay to use and have season things, so if we can, when you report back, some impact on that?
Yeah, we've tried to do it quite comprehensively, so we've done catchment analysis and user profile analysis, and looked at all the different user groups and those sorts of things.
Thank you,
So yes, we
thank you,
have got
Mr
that.
Chairman.
Thank you. Mr Wilcox.
Yeah, you've mentioned here that we're really only talking about council facilities. So 293, I guess that's Tauhua, is it? Or it's not Glide, is it? 293.
I'm sorry?
293 on the map.
293 is Glorit.
Is that Glide or is that Tauhua?
We'll just have to refer, I don't know all the facilities by name, by number, but we'll check.
Must be Tauhua, eh?
Oh, it is Tauhua.
Yeah, and number 3 is Kodawhiru. But I suppose,
Glorit's not there.
yeah, 'cause-
We've missed it out. And I can't see Ranui on the map either.
so I suppose it would be helpful, first of all, to understand within the context of this, especially in the rural, the northern area, to see what else is there.
Yes,
Because, you look at it and you think, oh, there's nothing there, but there's actually quite a bit out there.
there are, yeah, absolutely. And the maps primarily show council's network or those facilities where we've got a direct relationship with them to deliver a service on our behalf. So we're providing funding or some sort of support to deliver a community service similar to our own. But there are a whole range of other community providers out there, sports clubs, marae, churches, local halls that are independent. And we do actually have all of those mapped on a GIS system. If we showed you a map of that, it would be very difficult to read in this current form, in a printed form. But within our GIS system, we do have that. And certainly if we're doing investigations about what is needed in a community, we would look at all of those other kinds of provision, not just what council does.
Okay, yes. Sorry, supplementary to the chair. So then, Mariah, they're in the mix somewhere, are they? And are we working to kind of phase that into this whole process? I mean, I'm looking for a holistic.
So in section 1.3 of the network plan, we talk about that holistic approach. So when we're planning facilities, we are looking broader than council's offer, and certainly, Marae are part of that wider picture. And going forward, there may be opportunities for us to partner with Marae and certainly see Marae as core partners in the provision of community space, and for where communities do gather and meet and do a whole range of activities. So that although we don't have direct control of them in terms of they're part of council stock and we don't necessarily have an asset management responsibility to plan for them, we certainly need to take them into account when we're thinking about future provision. Because actually the opportunity might be in the future partnering with rural marae on delivery rather than building something new. So, that certainly is an opportunity that we'd like to look at.
Because a lot of marae are, not the mana whenua ones, but a lot of the marae are on council land.
Yes.
So,
And there is another piece of work that we'll be doing into the future to look at that broader picture of community leases. So again, community leases provide, spaces for all sorts of groups to do their activities, sports clubs, a whole range of groups. And they're not within the scope, the hard scope of this piece of work, but they are again within that broader holistic look of what's available to a community. And in the future, we'll be doing some further work around community leases and council's role in those and what's required. That's not immediately within the scope of this piece.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure, this is really good work. Just want to raise 2 or 3 issues, and they may have been traversed somewhat by other speakers. You mentioned that you're going to look at community facilities that might be on leasehold circumstances. I mean, there are a lot of those, especially in Rodney, and I have some familiarity with that. Obviously, you've got a lot of clubs and so on that have facilities that they own that are also used by the community. I
Yes.
can think of a range of rugby, football clubs and others, for example. One of the issues that goes to this generally is the issue of equity across various sporting codes, various users and the like. That continues to be very much in the hard basket, but it is something that we need to look at, because I'm mindful that there are other parallel pieces of work that are going on across sports and recreation, where we're actively looking at those things. Circumstances where you've got maybe hockey that looks after itself, but other activities that have to do a considerable amount of fundraising and like equity, gender equity, for example, netball versus other codes. And that goes to this as well. What sort of priority is that work receiving?
Obviously, it's not within the scope of this piece of work, but there is a plan over the next year to develop a sports facility network plan that looks at those sorts of issues. And it was an action that was also identified in the Sport and Recreation Strategic Action Plan, that whole issue of equity between sporting codes and the provision of a network of sporting facilities across the region. So Anita is actually working on that piece of work over the next year. So you will hear more about that, councillors, in due course.